My cousin's girlfriend spent 4 hours at that dinner table telling my wife, through smiles and careful wording, that she wasn't impressive enough to be in that room. My wife listened. Said almost nothing. Let her keep going. I watched it happen and I didn't understand why Alicia wasn't stopping it, until she looked at me under that table and pressed my hand once. Not yet, her fingers said. She already knew exactly what she was waiting for. Viewers, before we continue, please subscribe, like and share. My name is James Bourne. I'm a 34-year-old structural engineer living in Columbus, Ohio, and if you passed me on the street, you wouldn't look twice. I drive a 10-year-old Civic with a crack in the passenger mirror that I keep saying I'll fix. I own a 3-bedroom house that still has 2 rooms we haven't fully furnished, and I cook dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays because my wife, Alicia James, works longer hours than I do and comes home tired in a way that deserves a hot plate and no questions. We've been married 6 years. We don't post our life online. We don't vacation somewhere just to prove we went. We build, slowly, quietly, with intention, and that has always been enough for both of us. Alicia grew up in Gary, Indiana, in a house where money was sorted into labeled envelopes and new clothes meant September was coming. She learned young that the world makes judgments before it asks questions, so she always showed up composed. Not performing. Composed. There's a difference, and she understood it before most people her age understood anything. What almost nobody knew, because she never volunteered it and I'd stopped mentioning it since we moved, was that for 4 years before Columbus, Alicia had been a buyer for a mid-size luxury fashion house based in Chicago, Milan, Paris, New York. She'd sat in rooms that most people only see in magazines. She left that world by choice, when her mother got sick and proximity to family meant more than proximity to runways. She walked away without bitterness and never looked back. That kind of quiet confidence is hard to manufacture. Celeste would find that out. My cousin Troy and I grew up on the same block in Cincinnati. Same broken playground, same corner store, same everything. But somewhere in his 20s, Troy got addicted to looking like he'd made it. When he texted me that Tuesday saying Celeste was coming to Aunt Ruth's birthday dinner in Cleveland, I felt something cold settle in my chest. I almost told him we were busy. I should have trusted that feeling. Saturday afternoon came with thin curtains and quiet sunlight. Alicia stood in front of the bedroom mirror in a deep burgundy midi dress she'd bought 14 months ago at a shop in the short north for $62. She'd laughed when she bought it, told me it looked like it cost 3 times that. She was right. She paired it with small gold earrings I gave her on our 3rd anniversary and low block heels that she could actually walk in. Her hair was pulled back, clean and simple. She looked exactly like herself, no performance, no apology, just Alicia. She turned from the mirror and asked if she looked okay. I told her she looked perfect. She smoothed the dress once, the way she always did, and said, "Good. I want to make a good impression." I almost said something then. Almost told her what I was feeling, that low, dull warning still humming somewhere under my ribs. Instead I grabbed my keys and told her she always made a good impression. She smiled and clicked off the bedroom light. I thought about Troy the whole drive up I-71. We hadn't been truly close in 2 years, not since I refused to co-sign a loan he needed to impress a woman he was dating before Celeste. He'd called me small-minded. I'd called him reckless. His mother, Aunt Ruth, pulled us back together over the phone 4 months later like she always did, warm, firm, leaving no room for the grudge to breathe. Saturday was supposed to be a continuation of that peace. I wanted to believe it was. What I couldn't shake was a memory from Troy's office Christmas party the previous year, where a colleague's wife had mentioned, almost casually, that Celeste had spent the night making small comments about another woman's appearance. Little things. Wrapped in smiles. Troy had laughed it off when I brought it up. "She's just confident," he'd said. I remember thinking that confidence and cruelty weren't the same thing. Alicia touched my hand on the console without saying a word. Like she already knew. Aunt Ruth opened the door before we knocked. She'd been watching from the window, I could tell, because she had that particular look of someone trying to seem casual about something they'd been anticipating. She pulled Alicia in first, both hands on her shoulders, studying her face the way older women do when they've already decided someone belongs in the family. "Look at you," she said. "James told me you were beautiful." He was underselling. Alicia laughed, real and open, the kind of laugh she only let out when she felt genuinely safe. It was the last fully relaxed moment of the night. Troy came out of the living room with Celeste just behind him. She was tall, dressed in a cream designer wrap dress that probably cost more than our monthly car note. Her jewelry caught every available light. She moved through the room with the ease of someone who had never once walked into a space unsure of how she'd land. She was stunning. She was also, I clocked this in the first 10 seconds, scanning Alicia the way airport security scans a bag. Top to bottom. Slow. Thorough. Back up again. She smiled and extended a hand to me. "James, right? Troy talks about you." Then she turned to Alicia. "And you must be the wife." She let that word sit for a moment before she added, "Love that dress, so modest." She said modest the way someone uses a word when they mean its shadow. Her smile didn't waver. Her eyes were doing something completely different from her mouth. Alicia smiled back without hesitation. "Thank you. I love yours too." Nothing for Celeste to grab onto. Nothing sharp, nothing soft enough to exploit. Backstory lived in that moment. Celeste had grown up in Scottsdale, Arizona, raised by a mother who remarried into money when Celeste was 9. Wealth became armor, and armor required a threat. She'd been doing this, finding the softest target and neutralizing it with a compliment that wasn't, since middle school. Nobody had ever made her stop. That pattern was about to meet its end. Aunt Ruth's dining table had 7 people around it, pot roast at the center, sweet potatoes on both ends, and cornbread that had been making that house smell like home since 4 in the afternoon. For 20 minutes, dinner was exactly what it was supposed to be. Troy told a work story. One of Aunt Ruth's neighbors asked about my projects. Aunt Ruth kept refilling plates without asking. I started to wonder if I'd read the arrival wrong. Maybe Celeste was just polished. Maybe that first comment was nerves. Then Celeste set down her fork and looked across the table at Alicia with the gentleness of a surgeon making an incision. "I keep thinking about where I know that dress style from," she said, to no one in particular but aimed precisely. "It's very Midwest practical. Very sensible." She said sensible the way you describe something functional but unfortunate, a word that sounded like a compliment from a distance and wasn't one up close. Alicia looked up. "Sensible works for me. Steady. Warm. Giving nothing." Troy made a short sound that wasn't quite a laugh, the sound of someone choosing to let something pass that they should have stopped. That sound told me something I'd suspected for 2 years and was now confirming in real time. He knew exactly what Celeste was doing. He was deciding it wasn't his problem. Celeste continued, "Oh, totally. Not everyone needs to dress for the room. Some people dress for comfort, and there's something really sweet about that." She smiled at Alicia the way you smile at a child's drawing, generous, unchallenging, subtly condescending. I put my fork down. Alicia's hand found mine under the table. Her fingers said it plainly, "Don't." "Not yet." I left my fork where it was. I didn't pick it back up. I looked at Troy, who was looking at his food with the focused attention of a man trying to disappear into his plate. And I thought about Sandra, the woman he'd been engaged to in Indianapolis 3 years earlier. Kind, steady Sandra, who'd wanted him as he actually was. He'd ended that engagement because he wanted someone who made him feel like more. Celeste made him feel like more. That need of his was costing my wife her evening. The pot roast plates were cleared and the table had settled into the comfortable looseness of after-dinner conversation when Aunt Ruth said something about Alicia's earrings, small, real gold, nothing flashy, the pair I'd given her on our 3rd anniversary because she'd pointed them out in a shop window and then talked herself out of them. Aunt Ruth said they were lovely. She meant it the way Aunt Ruth always meant things, fully, without agenda. Celeste glanced over. She made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a breath, and said, "Oh, those are precious." Then she lifted her own earring slightly with one finger, diamond studs that caught the candlelight like they were engineered to. I always tell Troy that accessories are where women communicate their standards. She paused, then added, "No offense, obviously." She held eye contact with Alicia when she said it. Full. Direct. Deliberate. The table went quiet in the specific way tables go quiet when something has happened that everyone registered but nobody wants to be the first to name. I looked at Troy. Troy looked at the cornbread. Aunt Ruth set down her wine glass with a quietness that was its own kind of statement. She was 63 years old. She had survived a bad marriage, a layoff, 2 decades of Cleveland winters, and 4 decades of reading rooms. She did not miss things. "Celeste," she said, with the warmth of someone who has learned that firmness sounds better gentle, "those sweet potatoes need a second opinion. Come help me in the kitchen a minute?" It was not a request. Celeste smiled brightly and excused herself. The moment she cleared the doorway, Alicia exhaled once, just once, through her nose. Then she reached for the cornbread like nothing had happened. I watched her hands. I said quietly, "You don't have to keep absorbing this." She looked at me with something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite warning. "I know," she said. "But I want to see how far she goes before the night ends." She said it with a steadiness that stopped me cold, like someone who was already holding something. Already waiting. Troy and I ended up on the back porch with the cold air between us and 2 bottles of beer going warm in our hands. Inside, we could hear Aunt Ruth's low voice from the kitchen, and underneath it, Alicia's laugh, real and unguarded, the kind she reserved for people who had genuinely earned it. Every time I heard it, something in me settled. Every time I looked at Troy, something in me didn't. He offered me the beer first, which meant he already knew a conversation was coming and was trying to soften the approach. I took it. We stood quietly for a while before he said, "Celeste doesn't mean anything by it." I let that sit in the cold air for a long moment. "She means all of it," I said. "You know she does." He took a long pull from his bottle. "She grew up with a lot of judgment around her. She's just competitive. She doesn't always realize how she comes across." I stopped him. "Troy. I'm not here to analyze her. I'm telling you what I watched you not do at that table. Twice." He didn't answer. That silence was the answer. I thought about Sandra again, standing in Troy's Indianapolis apartment the one time I'd visited, making coffee and asking me real questions about my work like she actually wanted to know. Troy had ended that engagement in a text message. An actual text message. When I called him on it, he said they wanted different things. I'd let it go. I shouldn't have. Because what Troy actually wanted was a woman who made other people look at him differently, and what that pattern cost the women in his orbit was something he'd never once tallied. Through the glass door I watched Alicia lean toward Aunt Ruth at the kitchen counter, listening to something, nodding slowly. Aunt Ruth's hand was on her arm. Something passed between them, something quiet and decided. Alicia's expression shifted in a way I recognized. She wasn't just absorbing anymore. She was ready. I didn't know yet what she was ready for. The group reconvened in the living room for Aunt Ruth's birthday cake, and for a few minutes the evening found its footing again, candles, singing slightly off-key, Aunt Ruth laughing at herself for laughing. Then Celeste settled onto the arm of the couch and pulled out her phone, angling the screen toward the room without being asked. She'd been at a charity gala in Scottsdale the previous month. She had on a gown. There were men in tuxedos. She glowed on that screen with the specific brightness of someone who'd been photographed enough to know exactly how to hold their face. "This is the kind of event I'll probably drag Troy to this spring," she said. "They're doing a full fashion spotlight on Arizona designers. Very exclusive. Not really open to everyone." She let that last sentence land softly, then glanced at Alicia with what she probably believed was a friendly smile. Alicia was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Which designers?" Her voice was light. Curious. Nothing in it telegraphed anything. Celeste blinked. "What?" "For the spotlight." "Which Arizona designers?" Celeste named 2. And Alicia nodded, not the polite nod of someone pretending familiarity, but the slow nod of someone confirming information they already held. "Renata Voss is doing that one," she said. "She's been doing exceptional work since the Milan residency. Different scale than her early collections." Celeste's phone lowered an inch. "You know Renata Voss?" "We've met," Alicia said. "And nothing else." The room shifted. Not dramatically. Not loudly. It was more like a pressure change, the kind you feel in your ears before a storm arrives. Troy's cousin made a small sound that she swallowed quickly. Aunt Ruth, cutting the cake with her back to the room, didn't turn around. But I saw her shoulders. She was smiling at the wall. Celeste looked at Alicia with new eyes, the first genuinely unguarded expression she'd worn all night. Recalibrating. Searching. For the first time since we'd walked through that door, Celeste didn't know what she was dealing with. And she knew that she didn't know. That was its own unraveling. Celeste recovered quickly, I'll give her that. She laughed softly, reset her posture, and said with practiced ease, "Oh, so you're into fashion?" The word into was doing enormous work. It was the word you'd use for someone who had opinions about TikTok trends and rewatched runway videos on their lunch break. A hobby word. A diminishing word dressed up as curiosity. Alicia looked at her. Not with heat. Not with visible anger. With the full, present, unblinking attention of someone who has decided the moment has arrived. "I spent 4 years sourcing collections for the European and North American markets," she said. "So yes. I'm into fashion. Still warm. Still even." Not a single raised note in her voice. But the sentence sat in that room the way a stone sits after it's been dropped into still water, everything rippling outward from it. Celeste said, "I didn't know you worked in the industry." "You didn't ask," Alicia said. The warmth in her voice hadn't moved an inch. That was the part that undid it. She wasn't cold, wasn't cutting, wasn't performing the satisfaction of a comeback. She was simply accurate. Simply present. Simply herself. Troy's cousin made a sound she didn't bother swallowing this time. Aunt Ruth turned from the cake table and looked at Alicia the way you look at someone when your opinion of them doubles in under a minute. Celeste looked at Troy. Troy looked at the table. That nowhere stare again, the same one from dinner, the same cowardly blankness I'd been watching all night. "I just assumed," Celeste started. Alicia cut in, gently, the way you'd correct something that didn't need to be harsh to be final, most people do. Then she smiled. Clean. Warm. Unassailable. She picked up her fork and finished her birthday cake. The conversation around her slowly resumed. Celeste didn't lead it. I looked at my wife across the table and understood with complete clarity that she had never needed me to defend her. She had been waiting, calmly and precisely, to defend herself. Goodbyes took 20 minutes, the way goodbyes always do in houses where people actually like each other. Coats came off hooks, leftovers got pressed into hands, Aunt Ruth made 3 separate people promise things they would probably keep. Through all of it, Celeste stood slightly apart, phone in hand, scrolling with the focused attention of someone pretending they weren't aware of the room. When she reached Alicia at the door, she said, "It was really great to meet you. I hope I didn't come across as, I can be a lot, I know." It was the architecture of an apology without being one. Both women understood that. Alicia accepted it anyway. "You were fine," she said. "Enjoy the gala. No edge. No lingering. Just a clean, closed door." Aunt Ruth held Alicia on the porch for an extra moment before letting go. She said something low in her ear. Alicia laughed and squeezed both her hands. I asked about it on the highway, somewhere past the Cleveland city limits with the dark Ohio fields running flat on either side of I-71. Alicia told me Aunt Ruth had said, "That girl came here to be the most impressive woman in the room. And you were, baby. You just weren't loud about it." We drove in silence for a long time after that. Comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who have been through something together and don't need to process it out loud immediately. Then Alicia said, without looking away from the window, "Troy knows what she does." I said yes. "And he never stops her." I said no. She was quiet again. Then, "That's worse than what she does." She wasn't asking for my confirmation. She'd already arrived at the answer. She was just saying it out loud for the first time. I reached across and held her hand on the console. She didn't move it away. The highway lights came and went in long orange ribbons above us, and somewhere between Cleveland and Columbus, Alicia told me about the New York offer she'd been carrying alone for 3 weeks, a fashion consultancy, serious money, a different life waiting if she wanted it. She turned it down 2 days later. Not from fear. Not from doubt. She sat at the kitchen table on a Monday morning with her coffee going cold and her laptop open and made the decision the way she made most decisions, quietly, completely, without asking to be talked into or out of it. She told me afterward that the Cleveland dinner had been part of it. Not because Celeste had diminished her, but because Celeste had reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten, that she'd already left one world that asked her to perform her worth continuously, and she had no interest in walking back into another one. Columbus was where she had chosen to be. That choice deserved to be honored. Troy texted 3 days after the dinner. He said Celeste felt bad about how she came across and that she wasn't always like that. I held my phone for a full day before I wrote back, "Alicia's fine. Hope you're good, man." He sent a thumbs up. That was the last real exchange we had. I don't carry anger about it. I carry something cleaner, clarity about who my cousin is, who he chooses to be, and what that costs the people around him. That clarity is its own kind of peace. What I think about most isn't the dinner table or the earring comment or the word modest used like a blade with a smile on it. What I think about is Alicia's hand under that table, finding mine before I could do something I couldn't take back. "Don't," her fingers said. "Not yet." She already knew how the night would end. She had known before we left Columbus. All she needed was the room to let it happen. That is the woman I married. Not loud. Not performing. Not asking anyone to validate what she already knows about herself. She walks into rooms and people eventually notice. That eventually is the thing Celeste never understood, that when it takes a moment, it means it's real. When it's instant, it's just noise. Aunt Ruth called me the following Sunday. She said 7 words before she moved on to other things, 7 words I didn't fully understand until 2 weeks later, when I found out what Celeste had done before Scottsdale. Before Troy. Before any of this. When I finally understood what Aunt Ruth meant, everything I thought I knew about that dinner changed. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and share.